Welcome to the Nurture Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Denise Cagan, president of the DCA Virtual Business Support. At DCA, we believe in small businesses and the families they support. Learn more at dcavirtual.com. Life is complicated. Work, home, school, kids school, inflation, societal discord. Did I say work? And throw in being a business owner to boot. Today's guest is also the host of The Happy, Healthy, and Mostly Sane Entrepreneur. Welcome to the show, Ellen Leonard.
Thank you so much for having me. And with that intro, I'm now kind of scared to go outside. So thanks for that, Denise. It's just like very intimidating about the world that we're living in. She's just bringing the truth right from the start of the podcast. She's like, let's just come in hard. That's not candy coat anything. We're just it's a dumpster fire. Just that's what I heard.
Dumpster fire. Yeah. You know what? That's a good way to describe things. There's so many things going on right now and things that largely are out of our control.
Yeah. And thank you for bringing that up because that's something that often gets overlooked in terms of stress is one of our biggest causes of stress are when things are out of our control or even perceived to be out of our control. And that's always so interesting to me because like when I think about that rationally, I'm like, oh, everything's out of my control. Like that's so awful. And then I'm like, just don't think about that.
Oh my goodness.
Too much or too hard. But yeah, so if people are feeling stressed right now, that's one of the biggest reasons is because so much of what's going on right now, right? You cannot control a worldwide pandemic or let's say that you're watching the news and inside of a wildfire in California, there's an actual fire tornado. That's beyond you. You can't fire tornado is not something I ever thought existed. And
I was just going to say, I didn't have a clue that it existed. What is it?
Don't Google the video. If you're listening to this call, don't, because it's just it's very Sharknado. Like I kept it. So who's that guy from 90210? He's in the Sharknado movies. Ian Ziering? Is that?
I'm not sure.
There are like 5 Sharknado movies, which should concern us in general. Like I feel like that's a sign of the apocalypse, but also like, that was all I was thinking when I was watching that. I was like, okay, so Sharknadoes are totally possible. If fire tornadoes are possible, then Sharknadoes are totally possible too.
You know what's interesting is the moment you said don't Google it, I bet everybody's going to Google it.
Yeah. Fire. I think it's actually not called fire tornado. That's what I called it. I was like, that's awful.
Yeah.
Like, and who got that video? Anyway, I digressed. Everything. In conclusion, everything's stressful.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about stress and things being out of your control, and I'm sure we're going to dive more into that. But we're going to talk a little bit about judgment. And you said when we started, you kind of have a couple cats that are a little bit judgy.
My cats are so judgmental of me. You know who's really judgmental of me? My chickens. They are, really judgmental.
I had to bring that up because I thought it was hysterical. But in all reality, okay, so we're going to dive into stress and things like that. But I also want to put in there that sometimes things that lead us to stress in all seriousness is judgment. And it could be our judgment or what we perceive as judgment.
Yeah. And, everybody experiences stress differently. And that's such an important thing for people to realize from leadership all the way down to the individual. So when I work primarily in businesses, but I also work one-on-one with people. And I see it time and time again, this mindset, this way of being where people are like, I should be able to do this. This shouldn't bother me so much. And so when I hear that, it just breaks my heart because I'm like, oh no, the reason you're finding this stressful and challenging is because it is. Is because it is. And so I encounter judgment all the time. And we are our harshest critics. I don't know about you, Denise, but like I would never treat a friend the way I treat myself inside my head, the things I say. So yeah, judgment is definitely a huge stressor.
And kind of backtracking a little bit, you've done some scientific research on this, correct?
I am not a researcher myself, but there is a lot of science on this. I was a scientific researcher before I did this. So I was a huge science nerd for years and years. Ran labs, published papers, and then went into the wellness. So I'm a huge nerd.
Okay. We'll talk about some of the published, the scientific research about, stress and what the root causes of it are. I mean, I think everybody, to me, I feel like it's a little bit personal, but, I know there's some things that happen psychologically.
Yeah, there is so much that happens to us and that causes stress. And I think one of the most interesting things to realize is how personal it is. And I love that you mentioned that because it's often overlooked. Stress is extremely individual. So something that stresses me out might not bother you at all. And that's fine. It's not right or wrong. And so when I encounter that, often there's a mindset inside businesses where, well, that shouldn't bother you, or this is just the way things are. And that's kind of counterintuitive to how humans actually, work. Like, yeah, but that's going to stress me out. I react to stress differently. We each have different symptoms for it. So like, even if we're stressed out about the same thing, let's say, Denise, that we're both stressed out about being on podcasts. I don't think that's the case, but let's say that it is. I might get like headaches or like neck pain, and you might get like a racing mind or a racing heart or something. So there's so many different symptoms that can be related to stress. And here's the terrifying part. Stress is really, I feel like I have to whisper it. I feel like it's like I'm about to say a bad word on your pocket, but I'm not. I promise I'm not. Denise looked concerned for a moment if you're listening to this. She was like, no, lady, don't say a bad word on my podcast. But stress is related to like 90% of illnesses. That's what some studies have said. That is insane and very upsetting. And it just, like, when you think about that as a business owner, it's like, and somebody who's running their own business, everybody on this call or listening to this podcast, you can't afford to be sick. You know that. And
No.
stress is related to 90% of illnesses, like up to
Business owners rarely take days off for being sick.
Oh,
At least the ones I know.
No, I don't
You
know.
have to be like deathly sick
like
to take
super
time
sick.
off. And stress doesn't count as deathly sick, even though it could potentially get there. I know
Yeah.
when I'm stressing, one of the biggest things is I'm awake. I get on insomnia. I wake up a lot. I can't sleep. I either can't get to sleep or I wake up, either or. And then the other thing is, stomach issues.
Yeah.
That kicks up immensely because I internalize it.
Yeah, and those are really common. So like when I work with clients, I break it down into 3 different categories of the way symptoms impact you. So physically, mentally, and emotionally. So physical are what Denise just described, right? Like disruptions to sleep. So any kind of disruption. And I'm not talking about parents of newborns. You're just going to have to ride that way for a while. I can't help you. But everybody else, any kind of disruptions to your sleep, like if you can't fall asleep, you can't stay asleep, you have trouble getting up, all of these things are not only can be caused by stress, but here's the fun thing. They can loop back and add stress.
Yep.
Okay? Oh,
Because your
that's so
brain's
fun.
fuzzy.
Yeah. Yeah. But in the physical category, it's also things like chronic pain. Sometimes our pain is related to stress. We had no idea. Digestive issues, headaches, things like that. And then you get to mental symptoms of stress that are possibly related to stress are things like forgetting stuff, like our memory.
Mm-hmm.
I have to write everything down. And I feel like that's kind of getting older, but also like stress, right? Like it's like, okay, we got to write that down. But also like that foggy brain thing or not being able to focus, racing mind, those kinds of mental things. And then emotional things. When we are stressed, we are less able to regulate our emotions the same way we are when we're not stressed. I don't know if anybody else has noticed this. Sometimes if we have a bad day at work, we might, I'm not saying I've done this, come home and maybe not be as kind as we could be to our loved ones. Talk about judgment. I judge myself harshly for that one. So,
And I've seen it go in the opposite direction too,
yeah.
where, crazy stuff's going on at home and you come into work like a tornado.
Yeah. Yeah. So certainly, yeah, it goes both ways. Stress is both in our home life and our personal life. There's no getting away from it. It is everywhere, unfortunately. But that's also, part of being human, I think.
Yeah. Ellen, you taught the StressLess method for several years. Can you tell me just a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the StressLess method is an evidence-based method for learning how to manage your stress long-term that I created, and that's actually the name of my business, the StressLess method. And so I'm still working with it. I've been working with it now I am doing some math. I'm
Said
feeling
eight
the
years, I
pressure.
think, in your bio.
I think it's 9 years now.
9 years.
I
Okay.
think
Update
yes,
your bio.
one of the business owners who have also not updated their bio are there with me right now. Oh yeah, we got to change those things from time to time. You need to update those. Yeah, so it's a 5-step process that I developed that's all evidence-based. And the goal is to help people manage stress long term. So the step 1 is awareness. Like, you have to understand what's going on with your stress with specificity to be able to do anything about it, right? Thinking that stress is this giant, ubiquitous thing that you can't control or you have no role in. And it can be very easy to feel that way, right? Like,
It can
because it's
become
just,
very overwhelming very
yeah.
quickly.
So adding that specificity. So, like, what stresses you out? It's not just work. It's, well, what specifically about work, right? It's not, and when you say something like, oh, work is so stressful, that gives you no path to action, right? That gives you no way to do anything except to quit your job. Now, if people in here are lucky enough to be able to quit their job, hello, new friend. I would like to be friends with you, and we can go do exotic things together. But most people still need their jobs, so that's not actually an option, right? So, I mean, but like, what specifically at work? Oh, okay. So when Bob talks over me at a meeting, that stresses me out. Oh, okay. Well, now we have something specific we can work with. Okay. And also with specificity, how it's impacting you. Those symptoms we talked about earlier, right? How is that affecting you? And that tying that in, like, oh, I get that tightness, or, oh, yeah, I really do eat a lot more potato chips after that happens, or
Brownies.
oh, brownies. Hey, new friend. Making all sorts of new friends today. Denise has
Yeah.
got
I can
brownies
I can
everywhere.
tell when I'm stressing carbs. I crave
Oh,
carbs.
oh, I crave them all the time. Okay.
On that too. Well, that's another conversation.
But when you start to really get to the core of that awareness, even that in and of itself is a stress management tool, but it gives you a way to start working into step 2 of the StressLess method, which is intention. What do you actually want to be different? I find often so many clients and students will just throw everything at their stress without really knowing, well, I'd really like to sleep better, or I'd really like to, resolve my digestive issues, or I'd like to be a little less angry, right? When you have something and specific intention like that, you have something you can work towards, right? That's a specific outcome that you can be like, and everybody on this call, if you own a business, if you're listening right now, everybody listening to the podcast, I know you know how to plan. I know you know how to set goals. Like, I know you have that skill. So it's the same kind of mindset. Like, what do I actually want to be different? Step 3 is experimentation, right? You have to try things out to see if they work. Often I hear things like, oh, meditation is the answer. Well, maybe for some people, it might not be for you. And that's okay, right? So you try it out, you see what works for you, what doesn't, and you leave the rest, right? Step 4 is that reflection. Like, did it work? Why didn't it work? What might work different? And step 5 is planning, because I love planning. I mean, planning had to be on there, but it's also evidence-based. But like, why don't we have a stress management plan? That should be, as business owners, something that's an integral part of what we're doing, because the other thing that I didn't mention when I was mentioning the symptoms is all of this can lead to burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We all know business owners who have burned out from working too hard, from pushing too much. And they might have saw some success on the way, but in the end, it's not worth it.
Would you define what burnout is? Because I think people sometimes confuse stress for burnout, and
Yeah,
I know they're related.
they are related. So stress is more something like your day-to-day kind of stuff, right? So I'm so stressed from not sleeping, or I'm stressed from the work. But burnout was traditionally defined within the workplace, right? So that's where the definition started. But certainly we can be burnout across all of our things. But it's a decreased engagement, like a lack of, like, you just don't care about your job anymore, right? You're just kind of like, yeah. And not from a space of you never cared about your job, but like you used to care. And now you're caring significantly less. You're not motivated. You're not inspired. And it's starting to affect your home life, right? You're starting to see those same things trickle into your home life, where you just can't anymore.
Does burnout ever go in the opposite direction? Like you're under duress and stress at home, and so you
Certainly.
become burnt out on
Yeah.
the relationship, the situation, whatever the case may be. And then, all of a sudden we see a decrease in work.
Yeah, certainly. And that's more prevalent now over the past few years and what we've all had to endure
Mm,
together with everything that's been happening around us. It's completely beyond our control. We've all been kind of pushed into this state of chronic stress, right? As I said earlier at the beginning, when we don't feel like we have control, right? It's super stressful. And so we're in something where we have no control. There's no end in sight for resolving all of these issues that we're all experiencing, right? And that is a chronic stress that humans are actually not designed to handle. We're designed to deal with chronic stress like, somebody might define chronic stressor as like kids, right? I mean that in a loving way, parents. But like they're going to be bothering you for like, when they're out of their terrible twos, they're gonna move into eventually being a teenager, and then they're gonna be a college student, and all of that is gonna have some stress. But through the same lens, like there's ends to that, right? There's, then we're in the next stage, and it's the next evolution. And what we're experiencing right now, there's no discrete end. And
mm.
so if you're finding that challenging right now, it's because you actually weren't designed to handle this long term with so many unknowns and such a lack of control. We just simply aren't designed to do that. And so that's why it's so hard for so many people right now.
That makes a lot of sense. We've had, like I said, societal unrest and the pandemic, which I didn't even mention that, people forced into homeschooling kids that they have no idea how to teach, and balancing jobs or leaving the workforce to take care of the kids and then figuring out the finances. So,
Yeah.
pandemic was like a whammy.
Yeah, it's been a lot. And for a lot of people, they push through, solve the next problem, solve the next problem, solve the next problem. And what I'm seeing a lot with clients and students right now is that they're done. And I think that's what contributed to the Great Resignation, but then also is contributing to this quiet quitting phenomenon that's going on now, where
Mhm.
people are they just can't anymore. Like that whatever reserve they had, whatever resilience they were using to continue to push through, it's completely depleted at this point. And I'm seeing that a lot right now.
So, what can we do as employers to help our employees when we see signal? Well, first of all, let's start with what are the signals? And secondly, what can we do when we start seeing those signals to help empower them to feel more resilient?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you'll start to notice, and I guarantee everybody who's a leader on this, listening to the podcast will know what you're looking for. As I say it, you're going to be like, oh yeah. So a decrease in quality of work from somebody you used to be able to rely on, where you're like, what's going on with them? Like stopping showing up from work. So increased absenteeism, right? If you're running a larger company, you might notice an increase in healthcare costs, or taking advantage of FMLA or other benefits at higher levels. So you can start
Mhm.
to see it there. A decrease in productivity, engagement, and more fighting in a team, like more kind of arguing, more friction, just maybe people who used to get along don't get along anymore, or tempers are shorter. Yeah. And so it can show up in a lot of ways like that. Quicker responses that aren't as kind as maybe they used to be, snappier emails where it's just a little bit more clear that somebody's not pleased with the email that you sent them.
Mhm.
They're just performing at a much lower level.
Okay. And so, what can we do about that to
Yeah.
bring back that revitalization and reserve of resiliency?
Yeah. So number one, talk to your employees. I mean, it seems like common sense, but talk to them, because sometimes it can be something as simple as that 7 a.m. meeting is stressing them out. If you just move it to 8, they can get the kids out the door, they can get everything handled, and suddenly, like, they're back. So it can be simple logistical things or work-related things that you might actually be able to help with. That you
I'm
might
ever so slightly chuckling because it's like for some entrepreneurs and leaders, this actually brings on stress. Trying to have what they envision as a tough conversation, and it may not be at all. Like, hey, I've noticed something. What's going on?
Yeah, and that's exactly the word for word that I would use. I'm serious. Like,
Okay. Yay,
you
I
know,
pegged it.
Denise is clearly a good leader. Everybody pay attention.
Thank you.
But yeah, just being like, hey, I've noticed this is happening. What is going on and how can I help? Now, granted, sometimes you might get an overshare in there.
Hmm.
There's a risk of the overshare, but I honestly think that it's worth it because when you open up that dialogue, studies have shown that when you open up that dialogue, it builds that trust and it makes people less likely to quit. So,
Mm.
yeah, so it builds that engagement, it builds the trust, it makes people more invested in their work. They think that you actually care about them because you do. Like
Right.
you're asking them. And this is where I come back to that judgment that you mentioned earlier. There can be in a culture a judgment of, well, you should just suck it up because this is the way that it is. And let me tell you, that is a wonderful way to get people to leave your organization.
That might have worked 50 years ago.
Yeah. If you are looking to clear the decks, get rid of all your all your talent, if you would like your talent to leave, that's the attitude. But I encounter that so often when I come into work with organizations, and it requires a whole mindset shift to be like, well, no, that doesn't work anymore. They're done. They're just done putting up with X, Y, and Z. They just won't do it anymore.
Okay. So talk to them and see what you can change, basically.
Yeah, and see what they want. So just like every person handles stress differently, every organization is going to have different stressors. So a team of customer service people is going to have very different stressors than a team of computer engineers, right? They're going to have completely different stressors and completely different perspectives. So you want to really individualize any kind of stress management. So often what I see people doing is just throwing education at people. Like, here is this meditation class with no context. Here's this mindfulness class with no context and no correlation to whether or not that might actually fix the stress that they're experiencing. Spoiler, meditation and mindfulness are really powerful tools, but they just don't work for everyone in every situation. I just want to say that so somebody's like, you hate meditation. And maybe sometimes I do, but
I would agree.
Everybody.
I would agree. I would agree. And that was actually one thing that we talked about is, is this all about, mindfulness and meditation? And you're like, no, it's way more than that. And as we talked, I realized, okay, it is way more than that. And, I come from an area and background, have worked with entrepreneurs who are in the holistic wellness space. And that's a space that I believe in as well. Yeah. I think you should do things more holistically when appropriate. I think medicine is appropriate too at times. And so this would be my go-to is, meditation or yoga to kind of clear my mind. That is one of my go-tos. But I agree, it is not for everybody. And meditation takes practice. And that's really hard for somebody who's already on the edge to sit still for that long.
Yeah, I've always thought that was funny too. You're going to try to get everybody to sit down for an hour every day for a month or two. Who's wandering around oh, I have all this free time. Let's meditate for an hour. I mean, if you are, that's awesome. Congratulations. Your life is good. But most people don't have the space. So the next thing I would say to leaders or organizations who are interested in helping their employees learn how to manage stress more effectively is to recognize that everything that is health and wellnessy, like exercise, eating in general, but sleeping, all of these things are actually stress management tools. Right? So I always go for basic needs being met by employees. That is a way in to managing stress. You want to make sure your employees are set up to have really good night's sleeps. Okay, how can you help with that? Don't send emails after hours. Don't, so there's lots of ways that you can help them cultivate better sleep habits. There's ways that you can make sure that everybody eats lunch. I've been in organizations where the culture is such that, oh, we all skip lunch. Nobody eats lunch here. Or we wait until 3. We push through. We don't eat until 3 o'clock. And then they're wondering why everybody in the afternoon is all angry and not productive. And I'm like, because humans need food.
They've got a hunger grouch.
Yeah, I feel like that's just going to backfire. So yeah, so meeting those basic needs, those needs for being social, for moving. I don't say exercise anymore. I say moving because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't have time to go to the gym. Yeah, but movement counts.
It does.
Being with your kids, playing with your kids, Kids are intense. Just
Walking your
run around
dog.
with them, walking your dog. Totally counts. Gardening, just exercising in general. Like maybe you like cycling, maybe you like running, maybe you like walking or
Dancing.
hiking or dancing. Yeah. Whatever works for you. And that's the important thing, is to try to help people figure out what works for them, because people don't have to add new things to their life to manage their stress.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have to go all in on these new things. Oftentimes, you are already doing something that helps you manage your stress. You could just do it more or better.
Mm-hmm.
And so checking in with those things is really essential. Yeah.
Yeah, I have some employees who do photography. One does what did she call it? Cosmic photography. I thought it was just like way cool. She has this telescope and takes pictures of phenomena way out in the sky, and it's really awesome. And then others that sing and paint and write and all sorts of things.
And I love that you know that about your employees. And no, but seriously, everybody listening, why don't you know that about your employees? I mean, if you're managing a team of like 10,000, that's different. But if you're if you're managing
But the closest ones you manage, you should know some of those things.
Because those are ways to engage with them. And so that social aspect, that connection that people need, really supporting people in knowing that they contributed, right? A good tool for managing stress is also purpose, coming back to meaning and purpose. And when people feel as though they're connecting at work, they're valued at work, they're appreciated at work, that is an incredibly powerful stress management tool. It also builds that culture and helps people to be better at their jobs in general, which is amazing. But that connecting to why and what they're contributing is so powerful for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So, what should I have asked you that I haven't asked you today? I know there's got to be something that I probably should have asked you.
Well, I think that one of the things that often gets overlooked about stress management is how we can ask for help. So as business owners, everybody listening, I would like you to think about what you can actually hire out, right? So there are companies like what Denise does for a living. But seriously, you are actively helping your clients manage stress by taking things off of their table. So frequently, I encounter entrepreneurs who feel like they have to do it all, right? I used to be in charge of my own SEO. I should not be in charge of my own SEO. It stresses me out. I'm like, how many keywords do I need? And what are the keywords? And why do they keep changing? It's just like, Google doesn't love me. Like they want me to be stressed. But when I hire some nerd somewhere who loves that stuff, oh, it's so magical. So I would encourage people to come up with a team, right? Who is on your team? So your team for business, like who will support you? Where do you need help? Maybe it's finding a group of entrepreneurs to just talk stuff out with. It can be very lonely.
Like an advisory board.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like a mastermind or something where, I have a group of women I've met every week with for years, and we help each other now through personal stuff too. But like, it's always focused on business. We keep each other accountable, but it's social connection, and they're on my team. They're I can ask them for anything, like, oh my gosh, can you guys check out this funnel? Can you make sure it all works? Can you I can ask them for those things. I can ask them to help me with these things. Oh, hey, did you see that come across your LinkedIn? I want to make sure it's being prioritized by the algorithm or whatever. You can ask them those things. Can you like this? Can you comment on this? Like those kinds of things. Those are small things, but you can ask for support. And I also, in the same nature of having a team for business, have a team for your health and wellness. Like somebody like me, but also like you should know your doctor's name and phone number. Because again, when you're sick, you don't have time to be sick. You need to solve that.
Massage therapist, I know her number.
Right? And I'm going to say it, therapist. Listen, oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we're so isolated and alone, and there's so many things that we really can't talk to anybody else about. I want an expert in my brain and my emotions to help me. My therapist has heard about like broken funnels, a freak out when my website went down. She's helped me through employees who I had to decide what to do about, who weren't performing. And I needed a person that I could talk that out with and process that with so that I can then show up more effectively, not only for my clients and my students, but for people who work for me, right?
And that makes sense. That makes sense. This has been great advice, a wonderful conversation. I want to make sure that people who are listening can connect with you. So how would they do that?
Yeah, so I'm sure Denise will share the link in the show notes, but it's www.ellen-leonard.com. That's ELLEN-LEONARD.com and /stress podcast for some of my favorite resources and how to work with me. I offer one-on-one stress management coaching. So in 3 months, we can rock out your stress. And I also offer programming to come into businesses to help your team and your entire organization learn how to manage their stress and manage change more effectively.
Perfect. Ellen, thank you so much for the wonderful information today.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
It was. Thank you for joining me for today's Nurture Small Business podcast, where the focus is on business growth, technology, and people strategies to help your business thrive. At DCA Virtual Business Support, our focus is making your business operations run smooth so you can focus on growth. Reach out to me at Denise@dcavirtual.com if you'd like to learn more.